Hi there everyone, a quick note before we dive into this extra long video about the Deltarune ship Suselle. I needed to get this video out really as soon as possible in light of the newest lore dump given to us by Toby Fox in the Deltarune newsletter, and because of the very soon and upcoming chapters 3 and 4 for the game. We've seen in the recent newsletter that the topic of teenage romance, of potential relationships, is still going to be very much a through thread for a character like Noelle, and her situation is rapidly evolving as more characters get involved. Chapters 3 and 4 of Deltarune are absolutely going to change so much of what we've talked about in this particular video, so it needed to come out now, and I do not want this video to be the definitive end note on whether or not the ship of Susie and Noelle will indeed set sail and become canon by the end of the game. No, I want this to stand right now as kind of a mile marker in this larger discussion of writing and relationships, and I want the conversation to absolutely continue. Please pay attention to all of the points made in this video by the opposing parties and comment down below with your thoughts, your observations, and let's keep this conversation going. So without any further ado, let's dive into this very special, unique episode here on Camille's Harem. Hi there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode and discussion of Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends, and we have a very special discussion today with Sweaterman and Pappy. Greetings.
Hello.
Hi. That I don't know where that came from.
Say, some of you guys might know their work, and if you haven't, there will be a link to the video that spawned this conversation in the first place in the description. But we are going to be talking about the Deltarune ship Suselle. And the whole reason why this is coming about is because I watched your guys' video about Susie and Noelle. You guys did an analysis of the ship. You guys invited Suselle shippers to have a discussion with you. It doesn't look like that went over very well, and so I thought, you know what,
No.
Even though I'm a cruisy shipper myself, I will step into the role as a Suselle shipper, and we will have a discussion. Because
right.
even though I like my ship, as anyone who has seen our videos from Murder Drones should remember, I am willing to play all sides and sell weapons to all sides. I'm the arms dealer. So anything you guys want to say before we just start diving into this discussion?
Pappy, do you want to go first, or should I say something?
Well, I mean, other than making it clear that no matter what you ship for the purposes of just shipping, putting two characters into a room, being all lovey-dovey, drawing cutesy art, that's not what this conversation is about, or hopefully will be about. It's more a matter of, if this is how the story is going to go, then here are our complaints or ideas or evidence showing that might not be the case. It's less so about shipping, more so about the future of the game going forward.
Yeah, the old disclaimer. It's okay to ship it, but we don't think it's going to be canon.
All right.
That's basically all we have to say.
Yeah, say ship what you guys wish to ship. If any of you want to know what our stance is as Camille's Harem about shipping, we have our 10 commandments of shipping, which you guys can go and check out.
I might go check that out after this.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
One of the big things is just let people ship what they want to ship. You can literally ship a character in a wooden chair. Weirdly enough, there's an anime about that, which came out after we released that. Those 10 commandments. So
hey, there's an anime about everything, right?
Yep.
Oh, that sounds like bad SCP fanfic.
It's actually a really fun story, but yeah, I watch it more for the cat, because there's this chaos cat that starts destroying Japan. All right, so me stepping in as the one to argue for Suselle, I have right here a list of reasons why, at least within chapters 1 and 2, with all the other information that's been released to us thus far, why these two could end up in a relationship, a romantic relationship, and what that would mean. So my very first point for why Susie and Noelle very likely get together in a romantic relationship by the end of the events of Deltarune is to consider something right off the bat. Something that we ourselves didn't even see in the game, but is mentioned by Susie in Chapter 2. And that is Noelle giving Susie the candy cane pencil. This is important because this plays into a very powerful trope, which is the first girl wins. And I'm just going to nip this conversation already in the bud. Tropes in and of themselves are not bad. There are only misused or misunderstood tropes. Tropes are a part of every single story. They are the gears that drive the story forward. If you took the tropes out, you don't actually have a story. We just have names for various kinds of gears, if you will, that help to move the story along. That's why they're called tropes. And one trope that's very popular in anime and manga is the first girl wins. And Toby, as we've seen in both Undertale but especially in Deltarune, has some meta commentary happening with anime and manga tropes. The first girl wins is one of the biggest ones. And so Susie's already had her first positive experience with anyone in her classroom via the candy cane pencil from Noelle. If Toby leans into this trope, then that means that Noelle has already won. Because that's usually the way it goes for like 90% of the stories that use this trope. They just say, this is the positive relationship. It will continue to grow from this point on. And you accept it or you don't. This is one of the reasons why Don Machi is so frustrating.
I think we have two different points for counterpoints for this. I'll lead with one of them, and then Pappy, you can do the other one if you want. Or
okay, just do however you want to. I'll interject.
All right. The first point is like you brought up, Toby seems intent on commenting on and deconstructing these sorts of tropes in his stories. He doesn't usually tend to play these things straight. While it's true that it's a popular trope in anime and manga that the first person to use the main character as their positive interaction with their relationship grows and they end up becoming a couple or something, Toby doesn't seem to want to play tropes straight. He wants to be why is it that way? What happens if we mess with it? It would be a little bit out of character for Toby to just play that straight, to just go, oh yeah, Susie met Noelle and they had this cutesy little meet cute interaction, and now that is a meet cute, right?
Yeah, it's a meet cute.
Yeah, they have this meet cute interaction and they become lovers and it just keeps going like that. That would be a little bit out of character for him, I feel. And then the second point is about a different trope, and I'll let Pappy go on this one because it's more his area.
We were having a sort of pseudo discussion about tropes whenever the idea of this point reached our ears. And there are other anime tropes, specifically from Toby's era of anime, which he pulls a lot from his childhood of the 90s, and he pulls a little bit from the aughts and 80s, but mostly the 90s, of things like childhood friends or MC's first girlfriend tends to die. I don't know the specific name for the tropes. I'm not really a trope kind of focused kind of writer. But yeah, I'll let Sweaterman. He's probably knows what I mean further than that.
It's all right. I'll do it. Basically, like Pappy was saying, there's a far more common trope from the period of anime and manga that Toby tends to pull from, which is the childhood best friends trope. And Chris is Noelle's childhood best friend. If we're assuming that Toby is going to just play Taupe straight, which he isn't, it's not in character like I was talking about, But if he was going to do that, it would be more likely that he would pull from a more common trope in that period of the childhood best friends. Like Chris and Noelle have this relationship where they were super close when they were little, but they've begun to drift away, but they still really want to be close to each other. Noelle always is reminiscing about the time she spent with Chris. She talks about how she wants to reconnect with them. Chris seems to want to reconnect with her because they make an effort to like make jokes with her, and just like when they were kids.
Yeah, where you guys are coming from, there are other tropes that Toby can definitely draw on that we do see potentially in the wings of Deltarune to be used. The childhood best friends. It also said the first girlfriend dies. I'm looking at you, Gurren Lagann.
And another thing that I think I should mention while we are quote unquote nipping arguments in the bud is specifically the mention and use of the pencil. Now, this is something that we meant to probably cover in the document originally, but we never really got around to it. And it's simply that the context around that scene is a little bit grander than the pencil, and why Susie uses it in particular. With Susie, whenever you look at her victim list, you have Chris, who she's genuinely malicious to. She took Jockington's hat or glasses, I forget which one immediately off the top of my head. It was his hat, oh thank you. Out of a miscommunication, which soured her opinion with both Jockington and Caddy, with an I. There was a handball incident with Snowy Monster Kid or Monster Teen, however their name is in Deltarune, and
No Arms
Jockington
Kid.
further. Yeah, all of them are no arms kids, and they were playing handball, and Susie wanted to join in, but that situation led to all of their opinions declining with Susie. And then there's telling Temmie that her hard-boiled egg will never hatch, something that Susie looks up later, or we know she has looked up through her internet browser history that we see in Queen's Mansion. And Birdley just doesn't seem to like people who are generally gruff and stuff like that, so his opinion of her is lowered. But whenever you look at all of the, the whole category of the classmates, you start to notice that the only one that Susie is actively malicious towards is Chris. And if Susie is only actively malicious towards Chris, then nobody else in the classroom is ever or was ever a target for Susie. It was simply,
which isn't to say that she wouldn't have been mean to them. It was like it's her whole thing that she lashes out. She attacks first because she fears being judged and hurt by other people. But the only person she's actively going out of her way to torment is Chris. Everybody else she's just snapping at so they stay away from her. And Noelle hasn't even done anything to her, so
there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And the thing is about the pencil is that the story of Susie, giving, well, not the story of Susie giving that story, that's a stupid thing to say, but the context of why Susie gives the story is Noelle specifically rather, says that Susie doesn't care about anyone. And Susie responds, yeah, fair, but then gives this story about why Susie, never picked on Noelle, which, Toby then goes through the effort to have Noelle comment on how it is overly specific, which is a trait for people who are lying. I guess my ultimate conclusion for this, the pencil ordeal is that sure, it's a cute moment, and sure, it was possibly a reason why Susie would never target Noelle, despite Noelle's best efforts across all of the blog posts that we see in the Spampton sweepstakes. But Noelle was never a target. She was never going to be a target. And as such, Susie needed an excuse in that moment to explain why she never picked on Noelle. And she doesn't want to say, oh yeah, I hated Chris because they had a good relationship with her mom or whatever. Yeah. It was just oh, here, look at this pencil. This pencil was totally it. And then we stopped
Um,
thinking about it.
that was kind of rambly there, Pap.
I'm sorry, but it's
Oh, that's
one of the
okay.
things.
No problem. But
Got-
in a
got where we
nutshell,
need to go.
in a
Yeah.
nutshell, basically, that whole discussion got about because Susie could not be honest with Noelle about the fact that she really isn't as mean a person as she acts. She still needs to maintain this outward persona of the bully, especially since Noelle has told her that's what she believes Susie is. So in order to explain away that discrepancy, she has to sort of, even if that did happen, she has to treat it like it's the reason, like Noelle is somehow an exception, even though she really isn't, because she can't be honest with her.
Again, arguing from the perspective of a Suselle shipper, like that is something that I think you guys have a good point in there about like context. Like we are definitely missing some very critical context in terms of like what actually happened, for instance, on that day, and how does Susie really view the other members of the class. Since this is a game about becoming friends with everyone, and that's something that, as far as like the other relationships go, we what little snippets we do have does throw into sharp relief that Susie is truly more vindictive against Chris until the end of chapter 1. As far as what we can clearly see within the game is that when Susie does have these interactions with Noelle, they are markedly different from Chris, which you guys have already given an explanation as to why that is. But even with the other members of the class, Susie is far more positive towards Noelle from the get-go. Yes, the whole chalk moment is the awkward flirtatious bit from Noelle. The little reindeer girl is actually putting herself out there to try to get her attention. It's all so cute and adorable. The market difference, and this is what sticks out to me, and I think this is where the ship really begins gaining some viability within the game itself, is how Susie is, from the moment she hears Noelle to the very end, very positive towards her. For anyone else, from what we've seen with her interactions with Birdley throughout chapter 2, the way that she avoids Jockington and Caddy, and the way that she, and yes, Snowy and Monster Kid absolutely deserve a little bit of scaring after talking about Chris the way that they did behind Chris's back, or with Chris unbeknownst to them, Chris behind their back. Like we know that Susie can be way more brash, way more harsh, but she isn't with Noelle. And that already sets a completely different expectation for where we can go forward with these two characters. And it does set up something far more positive than Susie has had with any other character that she likes, and that's Lancer included.
All that is true to an extent, but also, like we were saying a moment ago, what has Noelle ever really done for Susie to behave that way to her in the first place? When Susie acts gruff, it's because she feels insecure. She feels threatened. She feels like she's being judged. She feels like people are out to get her. And she has to scare them into either respecting her or leaving her alone. And Noelle, from the moment she met Noelle, just sort of already left her alone. So there was never a reason to be mean to her in the first place. If Noelle started getting involved in Susie's business and like poking at her and like making insinuations about her, Susie probably would have, snapped at her. But Noelle never did, so there was never any reason. And on top of that, in this scene, Susie is very much caught off guard. She was in the middle of like a moment with Chris. She's feeling all this, what's the word? Adrenaline. She's very excited to like see her friends from the dark world again, are like worried that maybe they weren't real and what that means for her relationship with Chris. And then Noelle shows up and just starts acting all like, hey Susie, if it's not any trouble, would you want to and that just like, what the heck is she supposed to even do now? She's been thrown for a loop. Of course she would act that way. That's not necessarily an indication that she has some special feeling toward Noelle. It's just that Noelle hasn't done anything to draw her ire.
This also includes how little they've actually interacted from what we know.
Right.
Like, from chapter 2, they do get a decent amount. And, we'll get into, the specifics of chapter 2 and how they interact. But before the events of the game, from what we understand from the sweepstakes, they interact through cursory glances and Noelle staring through windows in the classrooms, either looking outwards to see what Susie's doing in the hallway or looking inwards back at the class to see her physically assault Chris and do nothing. It's hard to lock on to one specific thing where they actually interact, have a conversation, and Noelle pushes her bounds with Susie in any way before giving the chalk. And the chalk is something that can be missed if you haven't done it before. I think the specific ways that it works in the code is that if you do it on one save file, then it happens in every save file. But you could very easily miss it if you don't tell Susie or tell Noelle that she eats chalk in chapter 1.
Yeah, I actually do remember that being the case. The first time that I played through, I didn't tell Noelle about the chalk, which led to a very different opening. But then when I watched everyone else do their playthroughs, I was like, what did I miss? So it's easy to forget that would have been the case.
It just shows how little they've actually had a chance to interact before the events of chapter 2.
Even into like the newsletters in the past couple of years, the Spampton sweepstakes, Noelle is always depicted as too timid to even approach Susie directly. They have basically no prior relationship to this. Just like Pappy said, a couple cursory glances and just like maybe saying, hi, how's it going in the hallway or something. At best.
Mm-hmm.
At least as far as we know. Like, we don't have all the information. But as it stands, it just seems like really not that big of a deal that Susie would be nice to Noelle, or at least not nearly as mean as she is to everyone else, because of course she would be. Susie doesn't even like being mean. In chapter 1, when she goes to in chapter 1, at the beginning, before you go to the closet, every time Susie tries to make a joke at Chris's expense, she just immediately drops it. She just seems tired. She doesn't like being the bully. So Noelle has given her no reason to. So I guess that's our rebuttal for that point.
Okay. Then, this kind of follows through with what you guys have brought up earlier, with Toby liking to play around with tropes and expectations. Here is a big moment as far as like Susie and Noelle's potential relationship goes. When it comes time to jump into the second Dark World, and Susie, of course, is really happy because, hey, no homework, no project, hero stuff to be had. But remember that just before that, she was telling Chris that the Dark World is their biz. It is just between her and Chris. And Chris, Noelle not allowed. But the moment that she begins to realize that, hey, okay, Noelle has been captured by Queen, that notion goes all out the window, and Susie is gung-ho to go after the sweet cinnamon roll reindeer. The thing is that this is very easy to play off as just a bit of a joke, where it's like okay, then Susie wants to be the hero. Of course she's going to do it. It is a funny interaction between her and Queen at the very beginning, but Susie is 100% gung-ho about going after Noelle, saving Noelle, going to yet another castle, all Mario style. And this is where we get to see kind of a little fun inversion of the trope about how the prince must go storm the dragon-guarded castle to rescue the sweet, fair maiden princess. In this case, we've got the dragon storming the castle to rescue the sweet maiden fair princess. Which I'm just going to say, I really, really do love taking the trope of prince rescues princess from dragon-guarded castle and doing hilarious stuff with it. It is one of the most fun tropes to mess around with. But again, we see a very positive element coming out in Susie that revolves around Noelle. And this will continue through to some really big moments. But I'll let you guys first have your say about that before I dive into what those big moments are.
All right. Pappy, you want to do this one, or should I?
I think. Okay, I had a point that I was thinking of as you were saying that, specifically about Susie's heroism. If we look at her heroism post chapter 1, so basically all we have is chapter 2 right now. If anybody is in danger or needs help, Susie is more likely to help them irregardless of who they are. And of course, Noelle is the big damsel in distress for the entirety of chapter 2. Even whenever she's in the party with Chris in the city segment, she still has this air of a Princess Peach-esque capture-y, even if she's doing her own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, we do get to see another damsel. Well, not really a damsel, because it's Birdly. And whenever he is put into danger, against Queen in the final fight, or whenever he's passed out, I guess, after that fight, we get very little of a second damsel, so to speak.
But
Susie still goes through the effort to try and help him, use him as a point, and
express concern for him.
Yeah, and even whenever he, steals Susie off on his own for the escape plan, something that he does for selfish reasons for himself, because the initial plan was to have Chris and Susie go off and save Noelle, not Birdly and Susie. She still goes along with it because she wants to help both of them.
Furthermore, even in chapter 1, we can see that Susie is inclined towards helping people. When Lancer attacks Chris and Susie in the cliffs, Susie expresses concern for Chris. She tells them to run. She tells them where the escape is. She's trying to make sure that they don't get killed, and she hates Chris. She's essentially projected all of her own insecurities onto and attacks over all this baggage that she has. But even then, she's not going to just let them get killed, potentially, by some guy in some strange place. And then even later down the line, she refuses to kill Darkners. She very well could when Chris and Rouse aren't actively trying to stop her, but she just leaves those guys unconscious in the field, even when she could have killed them. It's in Susie's nature to try to do the right thing by the people that she sees around her. She wants to do good. She wants to be a kind person. She wants to be heroic, but she just doesn't think she has the capability. She's been so beat down and so demonized by those around her that she assumes that it's just impossible for her to be anything other than this terrifying beast that destroys everything in her path. She's more than that, but she just doesn't think that she can be. But it comes out in those moments when anyone is in danger, even people she does not like. So it's really not that much of an important thing that she specifically tries to save Noelle, because of course she would. She's a good person. She wants to help. Noelle, most of all, is just kind of nice to her, so it wouldn't make any sense for her to want to see Noelle get hurt, regardless of how she personally feels about Noelle. She didn't do anything wrong.
I can definitely agree with you guys on the fact that Susie's never wanted to be the bad guy, and having a chance to be the hero feels pretty dang good. Just why she's going to go through with this. Now then, a big moment really for this ship of Susie and Noelle comes, of course, when Susie comes barging into Noelle's room and is there to save the day. Yes, heavy shipping moment. I mean, for crying out loud, we have got the Ferris wheel with the hearts on it. I mean, this is a pretty heavy-handed moment, which is what a lot of people focus on. However, speaking as a writer, what really sticks out to me in this particular moment is the combination of Susie's body language and her facial expressions, along with the fact that she is actually the one carrying the conversation, which is kind of interesting because for a lot of people, they see this particular scene as the moment where Noelle starts finding some of her courage and is able to have the conversation that she's wanted to have for so long with Susie. And yes, it's a big deal for her. But when we step back, and oddly enough, for a moment that's all about the shipping in many regards, if you step back from the shipping, you come to realize that there's another dimension to this, where Susie is the one who is kind of guiding this conversation. She's the one who is encouraging Noelle. And as this is happening, there is a serious connection between them, where they find an understanding. Yes, there's some silliness. Susie is not exactly happy with the fact that Noelle discovers that she has a tail, or that she admits to wanting to be Susie Zilla. But by the end, they both agree that they feel a whole lot better just having had this conversation. And Susie goes from being very awkward, flustered, uptight. She's very rigid in both her expressions and in how her sprite is animated. And then by the end, she's laid back. She's leaning back. She gets wide. And not in the sense of like, oh, you've put on some weight there, Susie, but that she feels now comfortable, that she can spread herself out. She doesn't have to be entirely withdrawn being around Noelle. The two of them have an understanding. They have a connection, and her facial expressions soften to the point that we only really see those facial expressions most of the time when she's having a more friendly / intimate moment with Chris. And when you see that happening, not only is now this like a big shipping moment, this is a huge moment of progression for Susie, for Noelle, and it solidifies a positive, or at least an element of a positive relationship between them. Because yes, Suselle shippers, even though I am defending your ship right now in this video, we need to admit that there are some toxic elements as of right now, which mostly comes from Noelle's side. And I will address that here in a little bit. But let me hear what you guys have to say about this particular scene.
Pappy, you want to go first, or should I?
I'll be relatively brief if I'm going to speak about the Ferris wheel scene, because admittedly, in the words of the mighty Sean McLaughlin, it's a therapist's field day when it's broken down topic by topic. And while I agree with you in that it is a positive interaction overall, it is something that I do fully believe that Susie looks back on as both positive and feels bad about what they discuss. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily this massive linchpin wombo combo automatic argument winner. It especially when you look at the topics that they discuss heading into, onto, and through this Ferris wheel. They talk about Susie not caring about anyone, then the pencil story, which we discussed before, then Noelle haphazardly mentions that Susie could strike her in the face with an axe, and that would be a perfectly normal thing to do to wake her up, and something that she would enjoy. And then all the events of the Ferris wheel itself. There's the lie that the dark world is a dream. And I do think that Susie, after this experience, feels bad about having to lie to Noelle in several instances, which is, maybe an argument against me, and I'll admit that open-endedly. But the scene, how it flows, what's specifically talked about, how it flows, I'm rambling now. Sweaterman.
All right, Pappy, I'll take it. Okay. I feel like the big point in regards specifically to the thing you mentioned about sorry, what was it that you said? Noelle, Susie sort of leads the conversation. Is you ever think about why she leads the conversation? It's because Noelle comes out and she's being extremely like lovey-dovey with Susie. She's like, "Oh, if you're here, it must be a dream." She's like, "Oh, what do you think, Susie? Tell me all about you." And Susie isn't comfortable about that. She doesn't like talking about herself. She doesn't like being upfront with her emotions. So she just sort of has to deflect and keep the focus of the conversation on Noelle. She has to be like, talk about yourself, Noelle. Don't talk about me. Let's talk about you. And Noelle, of course, is inclined to do that because when she isn't thinking about Susie, she's usually thinking about her childhood, about Chris, about death, about what's happening at home, always caught up in all of the things that she misses. So it's very easy for her to talk about herself. I believe at one point you mentioned, I don't know if this connects specifically into anything you said, but I feel like it's worth mentioning that the Ferris wheel scene is entirely skippable. Rousey will just let you not watch it. This is not something that he does in Chapter 1 with the fight between Susie and Lancer. And I feel like that speaks volumes. Because you could say, well, maybe it's just there for speedrunners. But if it were there for speedrunners, why not backport that feature into Chapter 1? Because you can't skip the Susie fight with Lancer, but you can just sort of blast through the text with Noelle and Susie. You can just hold down the C button and boop, it's gone. If the scene is entirely skippable, that kind of renders it impotent. It doesn't really do much. At the end of the day, what realistically was accomplished by that scene? Susie doesn't come out of it any different. Noelle doesn't come out of it any different. Doubly so because she believes the whole thing was a dream. Susie doesn't talk about herself. She learns a bit more about Noelle, but mostly she has what she already understood about Noelle reaffirmed. She's a nice enough girl, and she seems to weirdly like Susie.
Well, I'll push back a little bit right there. Because Susie does learn that Noelle likes being scared. And that there's the bad scared and there's the good scared, and she likes Susie because Susie's the good kind of scared. She likes Susie because Susie is free to be who she is, which this is a problem on Noelle's part. How she perceives Susie is not the way that Susie sees herself, and that becomes very clear in this moment. But it is something that for Susie is like, oh, someone actually sees me in a way other than as the school bully, and that is encouraging to her.
I would push back on that, actually, because remember exactly what Noelle said. Susie does not care about anyone. That's false. It's patently false. Susie even cares about people that she doesn't like. She goes out of her way to try and be good where she can when she doesn't feel like she can be good. She cares deeply about Lancer and Chris and Rousey and even all the random Dartners that she meets throughout the thing. She's like, those people are nice. I like them. That was nice. She does care a lot about a lot of people, but of course she can't let that be through. And when Noelle says Susie doesn't care about anyone, that's sort of a reminder of how other people see her. And she, of course, says that's fair. She essentially agrees with Noelle about something that is patently false about her. And that whole perspective of Susie as being free to do what she wants, as not having any of these other expectations about her, about being able to break all the rules, that's also kind of wrong, because Susie really isn't free. She's trapped, but in a different way to Noelle. Noelle is trapped in the sense that she feels like she has to be the good girl and always do what other people want and always play by the rules and always have this nice smile on her face and always be polite and just sort of sit by while everybody else is doing everything. But Susie is trapped in that no matter what she does, everyone always treats her like she's done something wrong. Everyone always puts malintent onto her actions. Nobody treats her with any respect. And what Susie essentially has to do is break the rules and act out, because the only way that she's going to be able to get the little bit of respect or at least a bit of distance that she needs to survive it's not freedom, it's resistance against being crushed. And when Noelle has this perspective of Susie as being free, that is based solely on what she sees Susie as from the outside, which is the class bully. Somebody who just does what they want. That confidence, that's all a mask. Noelle doesn't see past the mask. Noelle really does see Susie in a similar light to everybody else. She just likes those traits about her. Does that make sense?
Yep. And this is where I guess I should already, like, as I said, I will admit that there is some toxicity to the relationship, which I know for many Suselle shippers, they're going to be like, no, but yes. And as someone who covered Please Don't Tease Me, Miss Nagatoro, which is a fantastic anime that people definitely need to give a try. And one of the reasons why I like it so much is because it takes a very toxic relationship at the beginning of the story and redeems it into a beautiful, wholesome romance. I kid you not, it's one of the best rom-coms I have seen in years. And it did something that I didn't think was going to be possible, and that was taking a toxic relationship and ultimately redeeming it without needing to, like, put these characters through the weirdest, most contrived situations, but just through Senpai and Nagatoro living their lives and learning to communicate with each other. And that is something that when we look at the Suselle ship, if we're being honest with ourselves and say, yes, there's definitely some issues here, that doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be something great. We have 7 chapters, 5 more to go, and that's a lot of time. Now, granted, chapter 3 is going to be mostly focused on the Dreamer household, so don't expect much Suselle stuff in chapter 3. But that's still 4 chapters that Toby has shown he can do a lot with even just 1 chapter in terms of strong, concise scenes, subtle hints and suggestions, commentary from other characters can mean and do a lot, which means that whatever toxicity is currently in the Suselle relationship can be fixed. And that's something that does need to be considered, especially if this relationship does move forward. It doesn't have to be a spiral of suck, and it doesn't need to be stagnant. It should and can grow.
That's true. I don't know much to say about that. Like, I guess one thing that we could say is it doesn't. Okay, well, the thing about Noelle is that she's got like a lot of issues, and they're the kind of issues that get worse before they get better, right? She's in this very precarious point where she's not doing well, but she's functioning, right? She's functioning well enough that she can sort of pretend everything is fine. She can convince herself that she hasn't done anything wrong, or that she isn't in that bad of a position. It would take her being shown that she is being toxic for her to really register that and want to improve. And the thing about that is, it just doesn't seem like there would be enough time in Deltarune for Noelle to both go on this arc of, like, reaching a point where she can realize, oh no, I'm being really toxic, and then work towards changing that and becoming the kind of person who could end up in a relationship with Susie in the 7 chapters that we have. It's like, that anime you mentioned, what was the title of it again?
Please Don't Tease Me, Miss Nagatoro.
The girl is deaf, right?
No.
Oh,
No, you're thinking of Comey. Yeah.
No, not Comey can't communicate. It was a different one.
No, there's another one. I can't remember its name, but I do know this is the one where the girl can't hear. The other guy who's a bully to her can do sign language, and he bullies her, but then they go together. Yeah, over the course of many years, they eventually become friends, and they sort of start. Yeah, I know that one. And in that sort of example, I'm assuming it works differently. I'm assuming it works similarly in the anime that you're talking about here. Where, like, it takes a lot of time, right? They have to live their lives and grow as people in order to reach a point where they could not be toxic to each other. Yeah. And while it's true that we do have a whole game, in terms of linear time within the world of Deltarune, we have
5 days going forward at most. That's not nearly enough time for Noelle to develop as a person to the point where she can not be toxic with Susie. It's enough time for her to maybe realize she was being toxic and start to work towards being better as a person, but it's not enough time for her to fully be done with it, especially when you consider the fact that Noelle is probably the angel, right? I mean,
Well,
she's
it's not a
constantly...
fact; it's a theory.
It's a theory, but it's a theory that's all but confirmed, I would say. There's the constant angel symbolism around her. There's people constantly calling her an angel. There's the fact that she dresses in this pure white gown. There's the fact that her whole family is Christmas themed. Her name is Christmas Holiday. Noelle is French for Christmas. She's been painted as a Christ figure twice with the Ring of Thorns and the way she's strung up on Queen's giant hand. There's the fact that there's 4 main characters: the Chris, Susie, Ralsei, and Noelle. The Deltarune has 4 figures, which are the 3 triangles representing Chris, Susie, and Ralsei, and the angel, which means if Noelle was the angel, she would also be represented in the logo alongside the other 3 main characters. There's the fact that her personality makes her a good candidate for the kind of person who would make a lot of fountains in an attempt to escape reality, but with all the emotional trouble that she's got going on. And like, if she is going to be the angel, then she kind of can't then also develop a healthy relationship with Susie until that's over. And when that's over, the game is over, right?
Well,
it's this whole thing.
We don't. The one thing is we don't, like, even though there's a lot pointing to Noelle being the one to initiate the coming of Angel's Heaven and then the roaring, is that we still have to factor in Azrael, and there's just a lot of stuff that we still don't know yet. But yes,
that's fair.
There's a lot of games still to still to go through.
It doesn't seem...
Of what we don't know is the thing. Of what we don't know, if we can extrapolate that Noelle is due to be an antagonist in any form, and her relationship with us as the player and the fun gang, if that is antagonistic in any regard, that would put Susie and Noelle on opposing sides of an ideology. And until that is resolved or fixed, and that can be fixed in a single chapter, I can concede that much. That could be chapter 5 or chapter 6 whole thing, and it's resolved in a single chapter. Then, chapter 7, they end the game, and Susie and Noelle are kissing or whatever. But you see that as much as the claim goes that there is a bunch of time remaining for Deltarune, there's also not a lot whenever you consider the possibilities for where their character arcs are going.
Now then, interest. So with you guys bringing up, with you guys bringing that stuff up, this is where we get a very interesting alignment of opinion between Susie and Noelle, because at the end of the fight with Queen, both Susie and Noelle are like, wouldn't it be grand if we could have a world where we could do this every day? Hey, the adventures, the ability to grow, strength, courage, yada yada yada, and yes, Ralsei shuts that down real fast. But the interesting thing is that we're left kind of feeling that obviously this isn't over yet for Noelle, and we realize it's not yet over for Susie either. Susie, by this point, when she has the conversation with Chris about bringing everyone else over, already knows full dang well that this is a bad idea and still proposes it anyway. Now that could just be taken purely as like, okay, then, so this is her just postulating. Wouldn't it be fun? Wouldn't it be fun? And of course it would be fun. And they're the heroes. They could figure some way of making this work out. But when you pair this off with digging a little bit deeper into the dialogue and how much she thinks about Noelle after the fact, you can see a kind of correlation right there of that this isn't just simply let's let the fun times forever roll on by merging the dark world and the light world, but that it is a kind of, in a way, an alignment of two characters realizing that they feel their lives would be better if they could stay in the dark world longer, which is a very important connection again between Susie and Noelle.
All right. I guess, Pappy, you're allowed to interject if you have something to say, right?
Yeah, which is, I wanted him to get his point out there because
Well,
what
I
I'm
don't mean
going
to
to say.
interject. Go ahead.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, yes. Sorry, I'm just very mellow spoken usually when it comes to things like this.
I just don't want to talk too much compared to you because I feel like I'm hogging.
It's
I don't
fine.
want-
It's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
But the big thing on that point where their ideologies align is that I think when you look at the game and its points on, its overall themes on fantasy, escapism, freedom, and there was a fourth one, but it slipped my mind. When you look at them, you realize that Susie, in her growth, is likely to, enjoy the dark worlds. The dark worlds are an escape. They are a fun place to be, but she could reasonably grow as a person away from the idea of trying to create them willy-nilly. And if she has that growth, say in chapter 3 or chapter 4, where Noelle may not be as relevant, then Noelle is not had that growth. In fact, that growth that she may have had in chapter 2 had been retracted by believing those events are a dream.
And increasing
suddenly-
desperation.
Yeah,
As
and if
well.
her father gets more sick, anything like that, suddenly it's Noelle still has this belief of dark worlds as fun fantasy escapes, while Susie has matured. And while they have met in the middle at the end of chapter 2, they may very easily what is that word I'm trying to say? Diverge?
Diverge, I believe.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yep,
thank you.
diverge.
And on that note, I feel like it's worth mentioning that despite the fact that Susie and Noelle are superficially in agreement on that point, Susie and Noelle are very different people inside. Susie is opposed to unnecessary harm. She hurts people not because she wants to or because she thinks it's okay, but because she feels she has no choice. And she hates herself every day for it. She thinks of herself as a well, for lack of a better term, a monster. She assumes that everybody else hates her just as much as she feels like she hates herself. And if it were up to her, she would not hurt anyone. Not meaningfully hurt. Like, she likes to roughhouse and fight, but that's a difference between hurting somebody and just liking to fight. Those are different. But Noelle, on the other hand, is a person who has actively allowed for and intended for harm to come to other people for entirely selfish reasons. Like, take the newest girl, the blog post from the Spamton sweepstakes. In that instance, Noelle knew that Susie would not attack Chris if she was present, and yet she decided to leave anyway so that she could spy on Susie. She knew that Susie would then torment Chris, and she allowed it to happen. And she continued to allow it to happen. And her takeaway from the whole thing was, well, that just happened. I wonder if I can get some Apple shampoo so Susie will do that to me next time. She doesn't like seeing people hurt, but she will do it and she will let it happen if it's something that she feels she will benefit from. On the Snowgrave route, and that's a big part, if you read the document, Snowgrave is a big section in there. The whole thing about that is Noelle is sort of pressured into freezing all these starters. She isn't given a reason at first, but she just assumes, well, Chris told me to do it, so it's probably fine. This is probably a good thing. And as she's going along with it, she's getting more strong, and this one Addison suggests to her that her objective here is to get stronger. And from there on out, she uses that as justification. She's like, oh, yes, I want to be strong, because she thinks of herself as weak. She thinks of herself as this helpless doe, as Birdley would say. Powerless doe is what he says, actually. But she wants to be strong, and she's doing this thing. She doesn't know why, but she's being told, this will make you stronger. So she's like, okay, I guess it's fine then. And so every time that from there on out that she has to freeze a tartan or destroy a puzzle, she's like, I don't like this much, but this will make me stronger, so I guess I'll keep doing it, even though she knows that she can she's perfectly capable of not doing it. She just feels like, I've already done all this harm. I've already started walking this path. I have no choice but to continue it. I guess it's probably good. Those are very different outlooks that Susie and Noelle have. And what was I saying?
As long as she can justify it to herself, it will happen to some degree. If she can justify, letting Chris get bullied, be it so that they actually move and swap seats with her, or she becomes a target for Susie, or to get stronger, as long as she can justify it, then she tends to gravitate towards that, even if it's ultimately selfish.
And Susie is the opposite. Even though she has justification for lashing out at people in one sense, she still can't help but think of herself as a monster. And while Susie and Noelle were on the same page about dark fountains, the fact that making dark fountains will kill everybody is enough of a deterrent, I would assume, for Susie for her to not want to do it, which is why she doesn't say, maybe we should make some more dark fountains to Chris. And in chapter 2, she's like, how about we try and find a way to bring our friends from the dark world to the light world? She's like, well, maybe we can't make more dark fountains, but maybe there's a way she could circumvent it. And as Pappy pointed out, she seems to be growing away from that whole sort of thing on the whole, whereas Noelle is growing towards it. She's becoming increasingly desperate for some kind of escape in her life, for some kind of way to get away from feeling this grief about death and missing her childhood with Chris and feeling bad about her father who's dying and being afraid of her mother who is cold and distant and mean to her. They will likely butt heads on this because they have such contrasting personalities and wants and needs on this subject. And this one is kind of a non sequitur, but you brought it up a moment ago. You were talking about how often Susie thinks about Noelle after chapter 2, but I would like to say the amount of times that she thinks about Susie after chapter 2 is 2 times. It is twice. That is not a lot of times. It is twice. And both of the times are times when it would make sense for her to be thinking about Noelle. For instance, like, she likes Noelle. Noelle is a friend. You think about friends when they aren't around. You think about friends when you see things that remind you. And like, hey, if Noelle was here, she'd probably dress this up like a Christmas tree, she says to the naked dummy. Or she sees Christmas cookies, and she's like, Noelle would probably like that because she's the funny Christmas deer. It's not like she's just aimlessly thinking about Noelle because, like, she's so lovestruck about Noelle, especially considering the kind of things that she does for other people like Ralsei, which is, want to talk to him, think about him, show concern for him, think he's really cute. That's what I'm forgetting.
He does take him off on the whole cotton candy date with no player input as well.
Yeah, she goes out of her way to spend more time with him for like a third of the chapter. She spends just like going out of her way to spend time with Ralsei, compared to the 2 times that she thinks about Noelle outside of when Noelle is in the room. So I really don't think that that's like a big thing. Twice isn't even enough to be a pattern.
Also, something really interesting is Susie gets dragged away from the party twice in chapter 2. Once at the start of the city segment, and then once about most of the way through Queen's Mansion.
Oh, yeah.
In the city segment, she does it 100% of her own accord whenever Ralsei says that they need some free time for her to learn healing magic. In Queen's Mansion, she only goes off on her own because Birdley asked her to. She's asked to do it without Chris in one and begrudgingly goes forward with it, while she's enthusiastically dragging Ralsei away in the other one. They're 2 very similar events, and she approaches them very differently.
But basically, yeah, the point is, not only do Noelle and Susie have very clashing personal philosophies on this issue. Like, Susie likes the dark worlds, but she doesn't want anyone to get hurt, and Noelle doesn't really want people to get hurt, but if she has to, then she will create a reason why it's probably okay, or just pretend that the problem isn't there. And also, Susie really doesn't think about Noelle that much in the grand scheme of things. Like Rouse several times is like, oh, Susie's probably thinking about Noelle right now. And Susie's actually just thinking about something almost entirely unrelated. Like you'll recall the Ferris wheel poster. Susie is certainly thinking of her Ferris wheel ride with Noelle. And she's like, the hell's a Ferris anyway? Some kind of giant tank? Like, you see? It's really not, yeah. I think that's, we're kind of aimless, you can tell. We don't usually do live talking. This is sort of like a podcast thing. This isn't really our strong suit.
That's okay. Ultimately, this brings us to the last thing. When Susie asked Chris who they would take to the fair, so we're talking Ferris wheel, say she gives two options, Rouse or Noelle. And when she says Noelle's name, there's a little bit of that knowing smirk, as if she's already made up her mind. So let's hear your
before
thoughts.
You say that. You got it backward. It's Noelle ... or Rouse. That's how she says it. It's not Rouse ... or Noelle. It's Noelle ... or Rouse. And Pappy, you had said something about like the smile.
It's looking at that final conversation, and the funny thing is that I've noticed that this final conversation has played like 4 or 5 times in the background of the background footage we've got going on. Is in that conversation, Susie is talking about mostly how fun it would be to bring her Dark World friends into the Light World. Mostly Rouse and Lancer. And, you know, discussing how the zany antics that would go on if they were in the Light World. And then she pivots over to the festival question. She's considering Rouse, thinking about Rouse, and then thinking about the festival. And then she promotes the both of them as equal candidates. Here's option A.
It seems like B. She might. Yeah. And this... I guess we'll get into that after this point, because I really want to take a chance. For the people who are watching this on the internets, I suppose we should just quickly express our biases. I'm a Ralph Susie shipper. Pappy is a Chriselle shipper. Lars, as previously mentioned, is a Cruzy shipper. So we're biased. Everybody is to some extent, but yeah, I definitely want to talk about Ralph Susie after this point.
We'll hold it together. You're okay.
I'm going to hold it together. Okay. But basically, yeah. It's not really a knowing smile. She puts more emphasis on Rouse when she says it, and also the fact that she brings him up as an option relative to her seems to suggest that she views them as equally good choices, at least. So that's really not as big. It's not Suselle evidence. It's just really not as big a thing as you'd think. Which, if you read the document, that's really the common thread with a lot of the Suselle stuff, is that it's just really not as much as people treat it like it is. Like, yeah, Susie likes Noelle. Noelle's nice. But that doesn't really mean that much, because she likes her other friends about as much as she likes Noelle, and she spent more time with them, and she goes out of her way to spend longer with them, and she thinks about them more often, and she has a better dynamic with them, more rapport with them. It's just really not that much, especially when you compare it to how utterly obsessed Noelle is with Susie, to the point where Susie T heals Noelle for 400 goddamn HP, or gosh darn HP. Well, you can edit that out in the video, 'cause I don't know if goddamn is a swear word. I don't know, man. But point is, it's just really not that much, and that's the main theme with Suselle, along with some other bits that we got into in the document about how, for instance, Toby seems hesitant to depict Susie and Noelle in the same space in supplementary material for Deltarune. no merchandise depicts them in the same space or like interacting. Only one of the pieces of art from the newsletters depicts them interacting. It's Susie not noticing Noelle. Some concept art shows Susie not noticing Noelle, and Noelle is cut out of that concept art almost entirely, so you can barely tell it's her. Recently, like a day or two ago, at the time of recording, Toby published some, like the first ever drawings of Susie and Noelle and Ralsei, and in that one, Susie isn't really noticing Noelle, and there's like a picture of Susie blushing on the same page as all of the Ralseis. Even if she was blushing at Noelle, Noelle is cut out of that one. It's just, there's just so much that we went into our document. We don't even really have time to go over it all here. It just really seems like the amount that all of this little bits of Suselle fuel matter is super overblown, especially when most of it can just be entirely missed. And I guess that's the point. I definitely let that one get away from me. I definitely rambled a bit more than I should have. Sorry for that.
Every now and then we got to get the rant on out. No, so now is me stepping out of my Suselle box. I just have to say, like, taking on this challenge of looking a little bit deeper to be like, okay, then, so how viable is this ship? And by the end of it, like, even like looking to be like, okay, yeah, like I can defend this. By the end, I was just like, it's a ship, and people are always free to ship what they wish to ship. But unless heaven and earth moves in the upcoming chapters, it's very hard to see a good justification for this ship setting sail for a wide variety of reasons. And there's a whole slew of other things that are happening that none of us have brought up that really point characters in very different directions.
I agree.
Yeah. You had said that you wanted to get into some of your personal points about why you think Suzelle's unlikely to sail.
Oh yeah. If anyone wishes to know my full breakdown, you can check out my cruisy analysis video where I go through all of the evidence. At least before the spam sweepstakes. But here's something big to think about. And you guys have already brought this up earlier in terms of time. So the purpose of Deltarune is to become friends with everyone. That has been the stated goal by Toby since the beginning. So when we consider that, I made a little chart that I have right here in front of me of the main relationships, not including the adults or the main Darkner characters, so even Ralsei included. This is just inside the classroom. Chris needs to become friends with Susie, Noelle, Birdley, Joggington, Caddy, Monster Kid, Snowy, and Temmie. And Susie needs to become friends with Chris, Noelle, Birdley, Joggington, Caddy, Monster Kid, Temmie, and Snowy. Noelle needs to become friends again with Chris, and then with Susie, Birdley, Joggington, Caddy, Monster Kid, Snowy, and Temmie. And especially when it comes to Noelle, the truth of the matter is that what seemed like positive relationships with her classmates are not. What this translates to by the end of chapter 2 is that we know that Chris and Susie are definitely friends, while then Chris is in the process of rebuilding their relationship with Noelle, and in the process of beginning to build a good relationship with Birdley. The same goes for Susie, and Noelle is just beginning to rebuild or now newly established relationships, positive relationships with her classmates.
Yeah.
We have 5 more chapters to go. That is a lot of time. That's actually not a lot of time for all of these relationships, which need to be addressed and need to be properly developed. And we know, thanks to the excellent writing that Toby's put into chapters 1 and 2, that he will give them their time. He's not going to rush it.
Yeah. And like you're even excluding like a main character, Ralsei. I'm like the biggest Ralsei fan there is, so it makes me mildly annoyed when you exclude him, but I get why you're doing it. But if you include him, that just makes it worse. And the thing you mentioned about how Noelle, the things that seems like positive relationships really aren't, that's really true, because Noelle is the kind of person who feels like she has to perform the role of the girl next door, of this nice, studious, what's the word, academic type of girl, which is like she's nice, everybody likes her, she does everything right, and that's just really stressful for her, and she kind of resents it. All of the relationships that she have, in some sense, are built on a sense of obligation that she has to perform this thing that she is not. And that's also one of the recurring themes of Deltarune, is people trying to be things they aren't, or being forced into roles that just aren't them. And it's just this big mess.
And fun fact, I actually did a video about the girl next door trope and how it's Susie who's actually the girl next door.
I saw that. I should get around to watching it.
Yeah. I had fun doing that one, because I'm like, yep, Toby is messing around with tropes. And if you look at it from the way that the trope has evolved over time, it's not Noelle who's the girl next door, it is Susie who's the girl next door.
And
which is really ironic, considering that her theme in the game, at least one of the themes associated with Noelle, not counting Lost Girl, which is associated with presumably the whole Holiday family, and then Ferris Wheel, which is just Lost Girl but music boxy,
is called Girl Next Door. And the thing is, small detail, if you go into the files of the game, Girl Next Door is called Noelle School. Lost Girl is called Noelle Normal. Girl Next Door is not even her real theme. It's kind of her theme, but it's not her true theme.
Which makes sense, because it also plays at the end of Chapter 2 after the roaring scene, which is not a Noelle scene.
Yeah, and it also plays when Susie finds the moss with Chris. Noelle plays the role of the girl next door, but that's not really who she is as a person.
Yep, exactly. And then one of my other big points to this is that Susie is a tsundere, which is brought up by Birdley. And though while we're not really supposed to take Birdley really all that seriously, he is dead on. Yeah. He is dead on about that. And the thing is that Susie shows her tsundere side to Chris and to Ralze. Everyone else does not get it.
And since you brought it up, I now cannot contain myself any longer, and I have to talk about Ralph Susie and how that as an option relative. It's still about Suselle. We're still talking about Suselle, but I need to talk about Ralph Susie in how it relates to Suselle, and how the things that make Ralph Susie look good make Suselle look worse by comparison, if you do not mind.
Go on ahead.
The first thing to note is that Susie and Ralph are fundamentally designed in everything that there is about them to parallel one another, to be the other's mirror image, so to speak. We'll start with just character design. Ralph is small and round and fluffy, and he's white and green, and he's white and green are his primary colors. He's got this big goofy smile. He's very frail. He's very timid. And then on the other hand, you have Susie, who is large and gruff and covered in spikes and shredded clothing. And she's got this like magenta-ish color purple, but that's very magenta. Magenta and black, which are the opposite colors of white and green. And she's got this very like standoffish, very like overly confident, kind of rude personality to her. Ralph is the healer. He's got low HP, not very good at attack, but he's got good magic. Susie really is just like very strong. She attacks. She's got lots of physical things. Personality-wise, they are opposites in terms of how they behave, but at their core, they are very similar people. Susie, of course, lashes out. She fears that other people are coming to hurt her, and so she attacks them to keep them away from her, to either gain their respect or so they'll just leave her alone. And she doesn't like to be controlled in any way. She's got that whole thing about her. And then Ralph is sort of the opposite. He's this very small, like, oh, let's all be friends. Let's not fight. He just sort of agrees with whatever everyone else wants. He doesn't like to fight. He hopes that by being the nice guy who always does what he's told and doing the right thing, just sort of blending into the background, that people will love him and accept him and he'll feel good about himself. At the core of both of them is this desire for compassion and kinship and to feel loved and to feel valuable. And that's really important. Like, and in the game, they have this very strong dynamic precisely because of that. They're the same inside, but they manifest it in very different ways. Like, Susie will be making some silly joke and Rouse will just respond with like this very sweet, earnest response, and she'll just get kind of thrown for a loop because of it. And like, in terms of their dynamic, Susie benefits from being friends with Rouse in that Rouse is patient with her even when she is doing things wrong or is doing bad. He wants to see her improve. He wants to help her. He's made it very clear that he's not trying to hurt her, and that kind of reassurance is valuable for her. It makes her feel like she can get better at that guard, because what Chris provides for her is kinship. Chris is also a weirdo, a freak like her. They both eat weird garbage. They're both quiet. They're both outcasts. What Lancer gives her is Lancer recognizes that she's a kind person. He sees these good traits in her that other people don't, and that makes her feel like, hey, maybe I actually am pretty cool. And like I said, the thing I already said about Rouse. And then what Susie does for Rouse is she's this symbol of like freedom and self-expression and bravery and just the nuance inherent in the world that Rouse was not given a chance to experience for himself. He spent his whole life in an empty castle reading old fairy tales. He doesn't know what the world is like, but Susie shows him. And when he gets all like, no, I don't want to, things have to go this way, we have to do it by the book, she's like, screw that, you got out there and you live your life. She forces him outside of his comfort zone, and that allows him to grow as a person. All that in mind, it makes perfect sense that even from the start, Susie and Rouse are always depicted alongside each other. They're your two party members. They have the most dialogue exchanges. They're always next to each other in merchandise. You remember the line stickers from the chapter 1 days? All of Susie and Rouse's stickers are like the opposite of one another. Like Rouse singing, "Don't forget," and Susie's like, "I forgot," and just like more like that. Just all this stuff that's just them together, them as the mirror of one another, them building on one another and just snowballing into this good relationship. And then you compare that to Suselle, and it's like, it doesn't have any of that. It baffles me things that Rouse Susie is not a more popular ship than Suselle, when it has all of the makings of a great ship compared to Suselle, which has very little. It has like 3 scenes of them like interacting in a way that makes their relationship look good. And it has freaking the newest girl. That's like the worst possible thing for Suselle at this stage of the game, right? It's Susie threatening the life of Noelle's childhood best friend, Noelle doing nothing about it, actively allowing it to happen in the first place, coming off of the whole thing like, well, that just happened, literally her exact words, and then it's like, I wonder how I could spin this to my advantage to end up with Susie anyway. It's awful.
What I enjoy about that is how Chris finds Noelle, and it's just like, there's not a word shared, and you just know it's like there's a rant behind that look.
What the hell are you doing? And there's the way that Chris just stares at her when she's like, so any idea where Susie is? It's like, what? It's a normal question. It's not a normal question, Noelle. Even Chris.
First thing in chapter 2. First words that are spoken between them. If you don't go backwards for Snowgrave, is her asking where
And-
Susie is.
Yeah, she doesn't even notice that Chris is in the room when Susie first walks in. It's like, Susie, cool that you're here. And then she remembers that she's in grave danger. Rouse Susie has all this going for her, and when you go to Suselle, all of the stuff that I just outlined about why Rouse Susie is good and why it works, and what evidence there is that it could be canon, including the Japanese translation of one of the lines in the upcoming chapters. Rouse tells Susie that basically tells her that he loves her very much. And Susie just goes, I know, can you stop talking in that stupid ooh-woo voice? The only thing that she has to say is stop speaking in that baby voice. She doesn't get mad at him for saying, Daisuki Dayo. I believe that was it, which means I like you very much, to the point where it basically means I love you. And that was fine. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, name something that Suselle has. Name something that Suselle has that is as strong as anything that I have just outlined about Rouse Susie, right? Name something. The Ferris wheel scene, you can skip that, and it doesn't really contribute much to either character's progression or opinion of each other.
I guess the Snowgrave scene, if I had to play devil's advocate, where Susie goes out of her way to talk to Noelle again.
So there's so to go along with that, because that was something that I was considering. And the problem is we lack the information of what that conversation was. I will posit my theory for what that conversation is the Snowgrave route. I think it's the exact same conversation that's had on the Ferris wheel, but that it ends without the Birdley interruption. Because Susie's happy and energetic afterwards, and I think that means that they had a very positive ending to however that conversation could have continued to go.
Mm.
And I think it's something where Susie's like, I have made another friend. I have made an amazing connection with someone. And I think that that's why she's so happy, and because Chris knows Noelle, and because she's also teasing Ralsei, is why she says that she'll tell Chris.
Because she loves to tease him, and that's... I'm sorry. It's very rare that I get a chance to talk about this stuff out loud. It's very rare. But yeah, that's very good. That's very good theory, Lars. Because realistically, like, obviously Noelle is in significantly worse of a mood, but she's also like kind of dazed and out of it. And with Susie's refusal to talk about herself, she probably would have gravitated to the same points. And with Noelle's constantly being stuck in this state of thinking about how much she misses everything, like, it's likely that she would go along a very similar path. At the end of the day, Susie's just happy to have friends. It doesn't have to have been anything like, oh, they kissed, oh, they confessed their love to one another. Nothing like that. It could just be that, hey, we're friends now. Yay! But then even still, at the end of the day, Susie cannot bring herself to just let Noelle be a part of the Dark World thing. Noelle has to forget. It's better that way. Because A, she doesn't want to risk losing, like, she likes Noelle. Noelle's a nice girl. She doesn't want to sour Noelle's opinion of her because Susie still is very insecure. She thinks of herself as an irredeemable monster. And of course, there's no way that the nicest girl in the entire, like, goddamn town, the rich and beloved Noelle Holiday, the starry eyes, golden hair, there's no way that she would really like the real Susie. That's an insecurity that she has. And there's also her insecurity, like, maybe Chris is only hanging out with me because of this Dark World stuff. And if anything happens to interrupt the very carefully constructed thing that we have, maybe they won't want to be friends with me anymore. There's also the thing about, like, people will freak out if the world is in danger. All of that, Susie cannot bring herself to be honest with Noelle about the nature of Dark Worlds and let her in on the adventure. She has to stay at an arm's length. Even when Suselle wins, it loses.
So, in closing thoughts here, say, I'm sorry if anyone feels upset that I didn't go more to bat for the ship Suselle. I gave the most powerful arguments that I myself could find while playing the game. It comes down to a matter of writing, in my opinion. Toby definitely gives the far more meaningful moments between Susie and other characters to other characters. Susie has some very important moments with Noelle, and they should not be discounted. Neither should we discount how much we get to know about Noelle. She is a very interesting and engaging character. Not being behind her ship does not mean that she's a flat character at all. But the thing is this, is that very often we tend to begin putting meaning into scenes that maybe wasn't there, especially when we really, really like certain characters being together. And it can get kind of silly when authors, or game creators in this case, have to kind of then go back and retroactively be like, no, that does not count. I recently just read a scene in the book Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson, where it felt kind of silly that he had to, or the author had to justify the fact that two characters did not end up together when, spoiler alert, they have not, like, one of the characters got married to another one 2 books ago. So it's like, that's old news. But people were so adamant that Shallan was going to end up with Kaladin that they would not let it go. And it's like, a creator doesn't need to address all the shipping issues that they themselves could create. They need to focus on making great characters with great relationships that help to drive the story forward. Toby has done that. And Noelle's crush on Susie is a big factor going forward. And there's still so much game left for us to discover that's obviously going to build more on what we've already learned right here. And it's okay to ship what you want to ship. But from our standpoint, it doesn't feel like Suselle is going to set sail by the end of the game.
In fact, personally speaking, Pappy, I think you also think this, but if you don't, then you can say I don't think this. I actively think that Suselle not happening will be like a very big part of the story going forward. It's like, it seems very likely that Noelle could be the angel, and Susie is sort of Noelle's coping mechanism for all that's going wrong in her life. Because if Noelle can fantasize about a version of her life where she was with Susie, where she was more like Susie, she can just sort of distract herself from everything that's gone wrong in her life. If I was with Susie, or if I was more like her, if I could live through her, then I wouldn't be stuck being the girl next door. I wouldn't be this powerless doe. I could do what I wanted. I could be free. It wouldn't hurt so bad that everything in my life is going, because I don't care. I can just go off and do what I want. I don't have to care about anybody else. I don't have to feel these things if I don't want to, because that's how she sees Susie. She sees Susie as this invincible beast. And if Susie were to ever come out and say, no, I'm not like that, and I don't like that that's how you see me, that would kind of destroy Noelle's biggest coping mechanism, the thing that she spends all of her time thinking about. She doesn't want to be stuck thinking about the past. She doesn't want us to be stuck thinking about her dying father. She doesn't want to be Noelle Holiday. And if she can't think about what it would be like to be Susie, then she's kind of stuck with that. And that leaves her with the other alternative, which is escaping into a world of fantasy. It would be the thing that sets Noelle down her arc of becoming an antagonist and like eventually growing to become a better person out of that. If she were to be called out by Susie for the things that are toxic about her behavior. And really, that's a thing that I think. I don't remember why I started talking about that. Man.
It's okay. We're all off the cuff. I think just going forward with Deltarune, as we are sitting here, time of recording, 37 tomorrows away, that, we could just be 100% off base. We could be 100% wrong. you know, and I've come to accept that in some capacity. But I think for the listener who's sat through these ramblings, however edited they may be in the end, that maybe you at least consider what we have said to some degree, and maybe, you know, sit and think about it. Think about how you've consumed fan content for Deltarune over these past 3 and/or 6 years, however long you've been in the fandom. You know, kind of deconstruct it a bit. See what you've seen, see how you've seen it, why you've seen it in this way, and critically think. And, you know, at the end of the day, you might do that and we still completely disagree. And I am perfectly fine with that. And I'd love to have another conversation with whomever of you out there has those opinions. And we are very lucky to have this opportunity to speak at all as we've had. And, you know, I appreciate the host for bringing us on and allowing us to do this and, you know, letting Sweaterman get his thoughts out in a way that's more permanent than he's typically used to. Same with myself.
And I'll just say this: I feel like what we've done here in this recording, this is something that I would like to see happen far more often between YouTube content creators, because so many times it's, oh, this person made a video that I don't agree with, I'm going to make a rebuttal video. And while that can be really interesting and engaging at times, it ends up leading often to arguments, especially when people don't have the time to together be like, oh, reconcile the differences. Oh, this is actually what you meant. Oh, can I push back on this right here? Oh, I've got a different thought than you do. And a real conversation, I feel, brings far more to light, both of what all the different parties understand, and it also helps to highlight stuff that maybe we didn't even touch on or didn't even think to touch on, and that other people then can react to. And so I hope that for anyone who's made it this far in the video, that you just recommend to other content creators, you know what, if you guys got a beef or you guys disagree, it is absolutely 100% okay to get together and actually have a conversation rather than talking at another person through your content. So with all of that being said, I want to thank you guys so much for joining us on this adventure that we call writing. Sometimes it's full of shipping, sometimes it's full of debates, but if you do it right, it's always full of good times. So until the next video, y'all, thank you for joining us, and tschüss.